笑，滔滔灭共潮。沧海一声笑，滔滔灭共潮。四海英雄聚今朝，苍天笑，拔剑斩红腰，浪沙淘尽怒白霄。整整70年，他把中华人民主义，还让这片土地变得满目疮痍。全世界投毒制造各种生化武器，我去，他答应了人类命运共同体。3代爆料，携手占有新天道，振兴我中华同胞，兴起了灭共浪潮。壮志冲云霄，看那国旗飘飘，别鸟铁岭河上，神州阳光普照。江山笑，血雨遥，谁负谁生出一份笑。风萧萧，人笑险如潮。盘古开天风潮。3年多的爆料，就是黑压死磕，东方实锤，每天都有一点也不嫌多。以美灭共，以共灭共，还得靠我们战友们行动。天佑我中华儿女，共建联邦新中国。黑夜显曙光，照亮东方的天。戳破公会的火焰，我准备了3世多年。越过了死亡幽谷，踏上了灭共之路。总有太多凶险，不出啊，只能虚度。清风笑，收归正道。一周踏浪自逍遥。苍生笑，热血万丈高。仰天长啸志英豪。战友们豪气穿云霄，寒武相聚在今朝。我定报 The one to save the world, sitting behind the people's side. We are running out of time. Take down, action, take down the system. Take down, action, take down the system. La 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 CCB 你完了。他们的恐惧是我们的武器，我们的胜利。谢谢了，兄弟姐妹们，你们健身了吗？行动，行动，行动！中共，你完了！Take CCP。
For the games you want to play, bring it on and I will fight to the end. Just watch and see. It's all started, everything's begun, and you are over, 'cause we're taking down the CCP. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. We will fight till they're all gone. We rejoice when there's no more. Let's take down the CCP. They have all lied for too long. We will end what they do wrong. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. Let's take down the CCP. Let the bullets fly a little longer, and you will surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. We will have freedom to live. We will win. You'll surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. Let the bullets fly a little longer.
中共，
Let the bullets fly a little
你
longer.
完了！
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
中共，你完了！干灭中国共产党这个 CCP， 还能让我们远离恐惧。Take down CCP。
They try to scare the nation with fabrication, but we see through the lies. We won't fall, we will fight you back. Police corruption with crooked assumption. They ran our lives, but no more. We will win. We will take down the CCP. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. We will fight till they're all gone. We rejoice when there's no more. Let's take down the CCP. They have all lied for too long. We will end what they do wrong. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. Let's take down the CCP. Let the bullets fly a little longer, and you will surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. We will have freedom to live. We will win. You'll surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. Let the bullets fly a little longer.
站起来吧！
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
站起来吧！
Let the bullets fly a little
为
longer.
奴役的人
Let
们
the bullets fly a little longer.
行动！
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
行动！
Let the bullets fly a little
你
longer.
完了！
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down CCP。
Bullets fly a little longer, and you will surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. We will have freedom to live. We will win. You'll surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little
CCP。
longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little
CCP。
longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little
CCP。
longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little
CCP。
longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little
CCP。
longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little
CCP。
longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little
CCP。
longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down the evil CCP。
Good evening, Fringers. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and welcome to episode 20 of The Fringe. I'm your host, David Vincent Bob. Yeah, that's right, episode 20. The Fringe is simultaneously broadcast in English and in Chinese on gtv.org. We are honored to have you here with us this evening and appreciate your patronage. Please spread the word about our show to all of your friends and family, and subscribe and follow us on gtv.org at MOS Talk. I'd now like to introduce my Friday night co-host. I can't think of a better way to spend a Friday night than with my partner, Ada. Welcome back, Ada. Great to see you as always.
Thank you, David, and good evening, Fringers. I cannot imagine Friday nights without the Fringe anymore. Tonight, we will be unpacking the much-anticipated Alaska Summit and highlight some of the key points that were spoken this Thursday, as well as covering some breaking news from this week, including the horrendous shooting in Atlanta. Back to you, David.
Thank you so much, Ada. Again, great to have you with me tonight. We're going to start off with Myanmar here. Part of Myanmar's biggest city has turned into a battle zone with burning barricades and security forces firing at unarmed anti-coup protesters. Traumatized residents have fled Tharyar, an industrial neighborhood in Yangon that has become one of the flashpoint sites in a nationwide uprising against the military's coup nearly 7 weeks ago. The junta is increasingly deployed heavier forces to quell the demonstrations, with more than 200 protesters reported to have been killed in the crackdown. Sunday was the deadliest day since the coup, with the local monitoring group documenting more than 70 people killed, the bulk of them from the Tharyar township. The junta on Sunday imposed martial law on Tharyar and later on the other protest hotspot townships, effectively placing nearly 2 million people under complete control of military commanders. Residents, many of them migrant workers, have since fled back to their home states, piling their belongings and families onto flatbed trucks and the backs of motorbikes. Those who stayed reported scenes akin to war. There were constant gunshots the entire night, and we didn't get to go to sleep, one resident told Agency France Press on Wednesday, adding that people were worried about even walking on the streets for fear of getting targeted by security forces. Another resident, a medical student, said there was a heavy military and police presence around the main parts of the township. They were checking cars, motorbikes, and the mobile phones of people going around the streets, he told the AFP. If they detected anything related to politics and the civil disobedience movement, they arrested people, he said, adding that authorities also threatened residents to make them remove barricades around the area. Sounds a lot like BLM to me. Hardline anti-coup protesters had camped on a bridge leading into the township's main roads on Tuesday evening, wearing hard hats, gas masks, and carrying shields. They had also erected barricades made out of tires, wood, sandbags, and bamboo poles. Some of those barricades were set on fire, leading to a heavy black smoke fog rising above the mostly deserted streets. Some protesters threw petrol bombs at the security forces, but otherwise appeared defenseless as they hid behind makeshift shields. In a residential area of the neighboring township, video footage verified by AFP showed volleys of gunfire lasting about 15 seconds. Information on arrests and violence has been trickling out of the conflict areas on social media, the flow slowed by juntas blocking mobile data access. Much of Myanmar has not been able to use their mobile internet since the early hours of Monday. The country is also placed under nightly internet shutdown for 8 hours. More than 200 people have died in anti-coup unrest, according to Assistance Association for Political Prisoners, a local monitoring group. But protesters continued to take the streets on Wednesday, with local media broadcasting images of people marching through northern towns and central regions. In the country's second largest city, Mandalay, saffron-robed monks marched alongside demonstrators who were carrying the red flags of the National League for the Democracy Party's leader. The United Nations on Tuesday again condemned the deaths in Myanmar, adding that it was worried about reports of torture and the deaths of those in custody. The death toll has soared over the past week in Myanmar, where security forces have been using lethal force increasingly aggressively against peaceful protesters, the UN Rights Office spokesperson Shamadasani told reporters. Deeply distressing reports of torture in custody have also emerged. The police had determined that at least 5 deaths in custody have occurred in recent weeks. She said, adding that at least 2 victims' bodies have shown signs of severe physical abuse, indicating that they were tortured. Over to you, Ada.
Thank you, David. And on to a very similar situation in Hong Kong. China's legislature has approved a resolution to overhaul Hong Kong's electoral system, its latest move to tighten control over the city. The Patriots Governing Hong Kong resolution was passed at the National People's Congress on Thursday. It will reduce democratic representation and allow a pro-Beijing panel to vet and elect candidates. Since the former British colony was handed back to China in 1997 under a control model called the One Country, Two Systems model, under the deal which gave the territory freedoms not available to mainland China. Hong Kong has its own mini constitution and elected parliament. The latest Chinese move follows a series of measures that have tightened Beijing's grip on Hong Kong, including the passing of a national security law and a crackdown on activists and opposition politicians. Detailed legislation will now be drafted and could be enacted in Hong Kong within the next few months. There have been other milestones in recent years at which observers have pronounced the death of Hong Kong. The national security law, for example, has all but wiped out the ability to express dissent on the streets. Once again, China is arguing that this reform, with its political loyalty test for candidates, is necessary to ensure stability. But critics will argue it abolishes another fundamental underpinning of the city's special freedoms, the ability to channel dissent through the political process itself. The pro-democracy protests, although sometimes violent, were accompanied by mass popular support, with as many as 2 million people taking peacefully to the streets. In late 2019, the Democrats won a landslide in Hong Kong's local elections, the city's only true democratic ballot. That may have spooked Beijing even more than barricades and patrol bombs. But is its victory now complete? It is very sad, the former Democratic Party chairperson Emily Lau said. But I insist this doesn't mean that the game is over for Hong Kong, because the fight will go on. And here at the Fringe, we certainly do hope the fight does go on. Hong Kong's parliament, or legislative council, helps to make Hong Kong's laws. It is made out of 70 seats, but only about half are directly voted for by the public. In recent years, some of the seats have been filled by pro-democracy figures. The other half has mostly been filled by smaller groups representing special interests such as business, banking, and trade sectors, which are historically pro-Beijing. The proposed new law will give Hong Kong's heavily pro-Beijing electoral vetting committee the power to vet all legislative council candidates and elect as many of its members. Hong Kong's leader, Carrie Lam, says she and Hong Kong's government, quote, firmly support, unquote, the move. Since 1997, under the unique agreement, a mini constitution called the Basic Law is supposed to protect certain freedoms for Hong Kong, such as the freedom of assembly and speech, an independent judiciary, and some democratic rights, freedoms that no other part of mainland China has. But fears that this model will be eroded led to huge pro-democracy protests in 2019. Some protests turned violent, and last year, the NPC passed a controversial national security law, which effectively reduces Hong Kong's autonomy and made it easier to punish demonstrators. Beijing said the law would target sedition and bring stability. Since the law was enacted in June, around 100 people have been arrested, including China critic and media tycoon Jimmy Lai, who was denied bail and is still in detention, waiting the trial.
You know, I'm not really surprised by any of this, Ada, that China is going back on their word that they would let Hong Kong be a free, autonomous country, basically by themselves, city. We know the history of the CCP is nothing but lies, based on lies, and I never had a doubt from the beginning that this would happen. This is very unfortunate, and we've talked about Hong Kong obviously in several episodes. One interesting fact we talked about, Isla and I, last week, or I'm sorry, this past Tuesday, was something that I forgot about, was when they were doing these, when they were protesting last year, right before, about a year ago, right before COVID hit. I was thinking, wow, look at all these people in the street. There's thousands and thousands, and China's going back on their word, and Hong Kong's not going to be free, but these people are really making a difference. And all of a sudden, COVID hit and the protests ended. People were restricted and quarantined. So it brought about a lot of speculation that COVID was possibly created to get the people off the streets. And that's the scariest thing about all of it. And it was something that I forgot about, like I said previously, until Isla brought it up on Tuesday. And it's something we need to think about in the big picture of everything with Hong Kong.
And it's specifically and especially very sensitive to Hong Kong because SARS, the sort of the big brother virus of COVID, was actually the most serious in Hong Kong. So till this day, people in Hong Kong are very used to wearing masks in public transports and just in public areas because SARS hit them so hard back in the day, around 2002. So the fact that Hong Kong was hit and COVID led to all of the protests being kind of paused for a second, it definitely led to speculations that the CCP might have released the virus targeting Hong Kong, but accidentally spread it to the rest of the world. Obviously, we're not going to believe anything that is just a conspiracy. However, we do see a lot of the time frame overlapping, which maybe coincidences can be a little too much,
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's the timing thing. I think this was planned. I really do. You can't put anything over on China anymore. I mean, well, they can't put anything over on us. We can see right through what they're doing. You just can't believe anything they say anymore. And as our fringers probably know, and certainly you do, the second half of our show, we're going to be talking about the meeting between China and the U.S. and Alaska for the Alaskan Summit. And one of the things that I will point out is the fact that no matter what they say or do, we always know that in the end, the CCP is just biding their time for something bigger, and it's all lies. I don't believe anything they say anymore, or I never have, to be honest with you. Okay, so moving on to back to the U.S., we have some pretty breaking news here. The United States Military Academy, the USMA, has also partnered with state-run Chinese universities, including institutions accused of doubling as espionage and cyber attack training grounds, and Xi Jinping's alma mater on exchange programs. What's more, West Point's leadership has visited the China-based schools to call for increased collaboration, including a former superintendent inviting national defense students at Peking University to attend the annual military training and competition at the USMA. The group, the China United States Exchange Foundation, the CUSEF, saw founder Teng Chihuahua speak at the West Point campus in 2012. CUSEF brochures reveal that West Point was one of several American institutions Teng spoke at. The brochure dedicates an entire page to Teng's West Point visit, describing 3 key activities. Foundation governors and supporters have group photo in West Point. Foundation honorary advisors, Dr. Henry Kissinger, Mr. Robert Rubin, Mr. Tang Jiaxuan, and Professor Xu Guangdi at meeting. And Foundation Chairman C.H. Teng delivers speech at West Point Academy. In addition to chairing CUSEF, Tang also serves as the vice chairman of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, the CPPCC, which has been identified as the highest ranking entity overseeing China's United Workfront, according to the U.S.-China Security and Economic Review Commission. A brochure from Primary Source, a CUSEF partner that helps set curriculum for American schools, contains an excerpt of Tang's speech, which notes that multilateral cooperation, particularly by the major powers, is crucial. Building strategic mutual trust is about reaching a comprehensive and accurate understanding of each other's path of development, strategic intention, and foreign policy. It is also about understanding each other's history, culture, and values. Developing trust takes understanding, and developing understanding takes an active commitment to listening to and respecting each other's goals and needs. We should encourage two-way tourism, encourage two-way exchange of arts, cultures, and sports, encourage exchanges of visits of scholars and students. The more we meet, the more we understand each other, the more we can create trust, his speech continued. I want to interject right here. That sounds a lot like the Confucius Institutes, the way that they use their cover to come over here and infiltrate our universities and schools. We've covered Confucius in the past few episodes. Wow, this sounds a lot like that. The effort, according to the U.S. government report, aims to co-opt and neutralize sources of potential opposition to the policies and authority of its ruling Communist Chinese Party, and influences overseas Chinese communities, foreign governments, and other actors to take actions or adopt positions supportive of Beijing's preferred policies. What's more, CUSEF has set out to effectively disseminate positive messages to the media, key influencers and opinion leaders, and the general public regarding the Chinese Communist Party, according to Foreign Agent Registration Act, FARA filings within the Department of Justice. West Point has also seen its leadership collaborate with state-run Chinese universities and spearhead exchanges with schools such as Peking University and Tsinghua University. Tsinghua, Xi Jinping's alma mater, also has a clear connection between them and the State Administration for Technology and Industry in discussions on what they can do to help the national security, according to former senior intelligence officer in the Defense Intelligence Agency and State Department official Nicholas F. Theomatis. The school has even launched cyber attacks against the U.S. government. Since 2007, Peking University has sent students to study at West Point with a press release noting participants follow the same curriculum as West Point cadets, aimed at strengthening their leadership skills and teamwork while building character. Dean of the West Point Academy Board, Cindy Jebb, traveled to Peking University in March of 2018, delivering a lecture on the academic development of West Point members. Jebb also visited Tsinghua University to engage in dialogue with Shen Zhu, chairperson of the University Council, to further facilitate education cooperation and exchanges between the two institutions. During the meeting, both sides show great respect and admiration for the institutions that they each represent. An event summary notes before adding Jebb hoped that the two institutions will conduct more collaboration in various areas in the future. Former West Point Superintendent Robert Carlson also visited Peking University, praising the fact that nearly 60 students of the USMA had studied Chinese at PKU as exchange students since a Chinese language project was initiated in 2007. Casson also gave sincere compliments to the exchange program, according to an event summary, which also revealed he invited national defense students at the Peking University to attend the annual military training and competition at the USMA. Ada?
Thank you, David. And here's something that a lot of our fringers might not know is that if China and the CCP is so confident in their own education system, then why are the higher up officials sending their children to the US for their higher education? For example, our CCP's leader, Xi Jinping, right now, his daughter, it's no secret that she actually attends Harvard University. And that's the same case for a lot of the officials up there that are able to afford and sneak their children into these higher level education in the US. So that's something to maybe dwell upon and really second guess this education that they're so-called promoting at the Peking University or the Tsinghua University. But moving on to a very tragic local news. A lone gunman has killed 8 people in an Asian massage parlor shooting spree in Georgia this week. Here's the footage from Fox News from this past Tuesday. Matt, please roll the clip.
All right, this just in, a Fox News alert, 8 people are dead after shootings at 3 different massage parlor locations in the Atlanta area. Jonathan Hunt, he's live with the very latest. Jonathan.
Good evening, Sean. As you said, 8 people now reported dead by officials in Georgia in 3 separate shooting incidents, all at massage parlors, all apparently Asian owned. Now, the first of these shootings took place in Cherokee County, we're told. That is northwest of Atlanta. There, 4 people were killed. Then around 2 hours later, there were two separate shootings at 2 different spa facilities in the Buckhead area of Atlanta. Now, in the Cherokee County shooting, and that is the first one that took place, police say they have arrested a shooting suspect, a 21-year-old man. He has been named by some local media. We have seen a picture of that man, but we have not directly confirmed the identity yet with the Atlanta police, so we will not report it. But as you see, they did have surveillance camera footage from the Cherokee County spa facility, and that is why they were able to track down a vehicle that they believed was being driven by the shooter. Interestingly, Sean, they say that arrest took place some 150 miles south of Atlanta. So if these shootings are connected, and that is still only a theory, but if they are connected, it would appear that the shooter traveled from somewhere north of Atlanta in Cherokee County into the city of Atlanta itself and then south. And as we say, the top line here, Sean, 8 people dead, all at what we believe are Asian-owned spas. Police saying at the moment that they do not know at this point if the 3 shootings are connected, and they do not know if the fact that many of the victims were apparently Asian women speaks to an actual motive in any way. Sean?
All right, Jonathan, we'll continue to follow that breaking story tonight.
Our heart goes out to those 8 victims who have lost their lives this week. It's definitely a very tragic thing. The suspect in the Atlanta spa shootings, Robert Aaron Long, 21 years old, who has been charged with 8 counts of murder, waived an arraignment that had been scheduled for Thursday, his lawyer said. The attack, in which 6 women of Asian descent were killed, brought a wave of outrage and attention to crimes against Asian people. Though Mr. Long had told authorities that the attacks were an attempt to remove the temptation of his self-described sex addiction and not motivated by racism. A former roommate of his at a halfway house said Mr. Long tried to end his addiction as recently as early 2020. But had continued going to massage parlors for sex since then. Still, politicians and community leaders said it could not be ignored that most of those killed in the rampage had been Asian descent. We need to take care of our Asian neighbors, said Jesus Estrella, who stood for hours holding a sign that read "Stop Asian Hate" outside of Young's Asian Massage in an Atlanta suburb, one of the 3 spas that were targeted in the shootings. Behind Mr. Estrella, smears of blood on a doorframe were obscured by signs and flowers placed in honor of the 4 people killed there. The police have identified the victims as Delana Ashley Young, 33, Paula Andre Michaels, 54, Xiaojie Tan, 49, and Dao Youfeng, 44. The authorities have said that 2 of the victims there were actually white. Less than an hour after the shooting at Young's Asian massage parlor, the shootings continued at Gold Spa and Aromatherapy Spa, which are near each other in the northeastern part of the city of Atlanta. There, 4 more people were killed, all of them women of Asian descent, the police said. The police have not yet named those victims. Rodney Bryant said there. However, Alex Acosta said on Wednesday that he had noticed a gunman parked in front of Gabby's boutique next door to Young's Asian Massage for an hour before the shooting. On the other side of the spa, in Perfecto Beauty Salon, Martha and Cisco said she and her co-workers did not make much of this, what sounded like someone pounding on the walls on Tuesday night, but had returned to their jobs on Wednesday with a mix of terror and dread when they learned what had happened. She says, "Life can't slow down. We came in fear. Imagine we are Hispanic, and some people hate us too." Rodney Bryant, the acting chief in Atlantic Police Department, said it was too early to say whether the police would classify the attacks as hate crimes. Mr. Long, who is white, was arrested about 150 miles south of Atlanta after his parents saw a surveillance image and called the police to say they believed their son was the man who was wanted. Captain Jay Baker of the Cherokee County Sheriff's Office said Mr. Long told them he was on his way to Florida when he was caught, where he planned to commit similar violence against a business tied to the pornography industry. Hours before the shootings, he had bought a gun from Big Woods Goods, a gun shop in suburban Atlanta, according to a lawyer from the store. David, this is definitely something, I mean, for our fringers out there, David and I actually had a little debate of our own before the show even started about this very topic. It's a very sensitive topic, and we understand that the victims' families must be so devastated right now by losing a loved one. And although we can't really say what's going on now, but we can all honor each other's opinions here at the Fringe because we're open to freedom of speech, of course, and that everybody has their point of view, even for a sensitive topic like this.
Yeah, that's right. And thanks for sharing that story. It's really horrible, and I'm sure we've all heard about this mass shooting that's been going on. That happened in Georgia. These Chinese ladies and a couple of white victims also. One thing from your story that I want to point out, and before I'd like to preface this with, this is only what I'm noticing and what all the other news outlets are talking about, the ones I watch anyway, Newsmax, OAN, the ones that tell the truthful news. Is they kind of like to plant a seed in your head right away when it comes to a story like this that deals with some kind of what now they're describing it as a hate crime already, before they've even though the kid has admitted that it's a sex crime. Obviously, if you're killing a bunch of Asians at one time, it can definitely be discussed, and it should be part of the discussion that it's possibly a hate crime, and something needs to be done about that. But part of Ada's story, and this was a quote that we took from somewhere else, so this wasn't Ada's words from her mouth, except for reading a report, was that they said specifically, Mr. Long, who is white, was arrested about 150 miles. That's the seed that's always planted every single time a report like this comes up. There was absolutely no reason to say who was white. Doesn't matter. But it does matter to people that want to take the next step when it comes to some horrific crime like this and start crying white supremacy and racism. It's horrible that this happened. And this piece of trash white guy will certainly get the death penalty unless they can find him mentally unstable. Maybe there's something wrong with him. We're not even that far yet. We don't know. But what he did was horrific. And I have no doubt justice will be served. But here's the issues that I've noticed already. the MSM, the mainstream media, and a government full of racist Democrats is already, before these women were even put into the ground and given a proper burial, and before this kid was even fully interviewed, they're calling us white supremacy, gun-toting hate crime. He even admitted that it wasn't about race and that he's a sexual, porn-addicted deviant and was even kicked out of his house because of a porn addiction. That might even be, Ada, why he was in a halfway house. But to turn this into pointing the finger automatically at race and saying that this is a hate crime of a white person against an Asian person is completely preemptive, and it's unnecessary at this point. Here's your stats. I got these stats from an Asian American podcaster who's very, very famous. I can't remember his name. I wish I could. That just sounds so cliche that I'm going to say that and not have supporting documentation. I'm sorry. But 25% of crimes against Asians are by Caucasians, who make up 60.1% of the population. 25%, an equal amount of crimes against Asians are by blacks, who make up 12.2% of the population. And the other 50% is by other nationalities within the U.S. And again, this wasn't even a crime against Asians for reasons other than race. But you watch as the MSM, and they've been doing it already, Ada, and the Dems twist this into a white supremacist hate crime because of Donald J. Trump. That's what's going to happen. I'm predicting, and I'm telling you right now, somehow Trump's name is going to come out in this. And matter of fact, I think it has already. And we already have Biden today going down to Georgia to push a COVID hate crime bill. That's what they're calling this now. They're actually saying, because Donald J. Trump, our former president, called this virus a China virus, that the hatred against Chinese people is because of him, specifically and only because of him. So that's why the Democrats are calling this the COVID hate crime bill, because they're pushing this narrative that this shooting of these Asian women happened because of COVID, which came from China. See how they're trying to connect all these dots in a very abnormal, lunatic kind of way? It doesn't make any sense. And I'm telling you right now, white people are getting sick and tired of being called white supremacists and bigots and misogynists when we're not. When you have an isolated case that the MSM and the media want to turn into that, and everybody starts putting all white people into that category, that's when you have problems. And this all started because of the CCP. That's one thing we need to remember, Ada, is we wouldn't even be in this position right now if they didn't create this virus in that lab in Wuhan, China. I'm sorry, real quick. My heart goes out to these women, believe me, more than anybody. But the fact that they're pointing fingers already and blaming it on a white hate crime against Asians is completely unacceptable to me at this point. Even if it does turn out to be that, the backlash against white people in general is going to be something that we haven't seen in a long time. I'm not sure that Asians are going to get out in the street and burn things to the ground and loot and riot like BLM did. Right. But yeah, this is definitely turning into something that we did not want to see happen.
Right, David, but I'm going to rebut you on one of the points that you pointed out just now about how this should not be connected to COVID. However, since COVID, the hate crimes against Asian people, or just these so-called crimes that just happened and happened to Asian people, has went up by 150% at least. And that has something to do with how former President Trump called it the China virus. And we know that no one's flawless. So that narrative definitely planted a seed in people's head as well, saying that, well, this virus, because it came from China, Chinese people are responsible to it. And a lot of the restrictions that people have in the US now is because of this virus that came from China. What could have been good for when it happened back in 2019 or 2020, early 2020, is calling this the CCP virus to differentiate the Chinese people from the CCP government that is evil and completely corrupt. But having this narrative that Asian people or Chinese Americans are tied to COVID definitely brought a lot of anger and hate out of people. And that is unavoidable with statistics where these crimes are just escalating very quickly. And the Asian population has suffered a whole lot since the outbreak of COVID, which we should trace back to the CCP, 100%. And according to this crime that happened past Tuesday, the thing that mainstream media has sort of held on to why it's against Asian people in general is because Mr. Long also said that he has a fetish towards Asian women. And as a woman of Asian descent myself, I understand that some people are uncomfortable and unhappy with being called a fetish because a race or who you are or what descent you are from should not be a fetish, should not be a characteristic, should not be something to be fetishized towards. And I understand that narrative as well, although it could definitely be planted in your head and made enlarged, as we will talk about later on with the Alaska, that these narratives are definitely used by the CCP as well, which makes it all the more speculated that maybe the CCP has something to do with all these narratives that are planted in the Americans' heads. But it's definitely not coming from nowhere, David. Wouldn't you agree?
I'd have to say that, in past episodes, I definitely have said that I think China virus was a little harsh.
Right.
There's people that argue both sides of that. Spanish flu. Are Spanish people being hung from the nearest flagpole because it's Spanish flu? No, that's not happening. So it just depends on which side of the coin you flip, or which side of the aisle you're on, basically, and the way that people take it. It probably would have been better to call it the CCP virus. I was watching Newsmax tonight, and one of the reporters there, one of the anchors there, called it the China virus.
Right.
It can be. Like I said, I haven't been a big supporter of it being called the China virus. But at the same time, I don't hold it against Chinese people that this virus came from China, because I have common sense. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't. So I'm not saying that you don't, but I'm saying that some people don't. They take it as, oh, it's a China virus, I hate all Chinese people. Yes, you're going to have people like that in the United States. My point of my whole soliloquy there was that I am getting tired of white people in general. We are also there is racism like to levels we have never seen against white people. White people in America are 70% of the population, are 66 to 7, we're the largest percentage of the population in America. So there's all kinds of things we could get into forever about this. And it's about racism against white people, which isn't discussed very much. It's almost like, and this is the way I feel, is like we're being punished for something that happened 3 generations ago, 300 years ago with Black Lives Matter. And now everything that happens because of what's happening with Black Lives Matter, all the focus is being put on how bad white people were 300 years ago. I don't even have any relatives that own slaves. I don't even know any people that were relatives of slave owners. I don't, you know what I mean? But I'm still put in this category. And then some of the arguments I've heard, well, then now you know what it's like to be a black man. No, that's not what it's about at all. I've never went through my life taught, to be racist. My family didn't raise me that way. I never have been that way. I have black friends. I have black friends that hate BLM, that think it's ridiculous. Right. So the problem is in the narrative. It really is. It's in the voice that's speaking against these things, and people are listening to it, and it's got to stop. I am so sorry about what happened to those Asian women, but already the MSM is painting a picture that it's a white racist that did this, and now that gives other little pockets of people, BLM and Antifa. Well, Antifa is mostly white, and actually a lot of BLM is white. That black people are like, yo, you got to stop acting that way. You're making me look bad. But going back to my point is that we are made to look like we're this horrible race of people, and the whole reason America is the way it is right now, all these bad things that are going on right now, is because of white people, and that is completely untrue. The reason things are happening right now is because big corporations are letting it happen. Cancel culture is happening because they're folding and giving into these little pockets, these little groups of people that are radicals, instead of standing up for themselves and saying, no, I'm not taking Dr. Seuss off the market. Well, Dr. Seuss is a different story. Actually, to be honest with you, they were also affected by cancel culture. They were proactive about it. They said, well, maybe this book could be seen as racist. We better take it off the market. So they took 6 of their books off the market. But cancel culture in general is basically companies who are worried about their bottom line being affected. So they go along with this crowd, this small crowd of these people that are radicals. And then all of a sudden, the backlash from it is it turns into this nation that it was created by racist white people. And these racist white people are still running the nation, and they need to go down. That's where we're at right now.
It really is, David. And it's like you said, it's all about how the media or the MSM portrays these stories and sells it to the public. Because the way they narrate a story really comes down to how people digest it. And because they're narrating it in such a forceful way, people are just taking it as it is. So like you said, sometimes common sense doesn't really kick in right away, and they just digest whatever information that's fed to them as it is. And that's obviously what we're also trying to advocate for, is that we must process all of the information that we're receiving. No matter if it's on MSM or with us, you get to make your own choices here. You get to look at all the facts, the statistics, and everything that's placed in front of you. Then you decide for yourself what you believe is true. And what we believe is that the CCP is definitely trying to cause chaos within the United States. And like we'll discuss further with the Alaska summit, is that it's succeeding to an extent, because chaos is definitely a part of our everyday lives right now, especially with this shooting that just happened this week. A lot of things are happening that are distracting us from the virus and where the virus is coming from. Every time there's any sort of new information that we hear about the virus, suddenly something else comes up. And we don't believe in conspiracies, but we also don't believe in coincidences. So here it is. This is all the information we have for you, but definitely process and definitely make your own decision when it comes to what you believe is right and wrong.
Yeah, I think that, I'm going to close this up here, and then we got to move on to our next segment. We're running out of time here. We got a lot to cover with the second half of the show. Is that the it probably would have been a lot better to call this the CCP virus, but I don't hold it against anybody
Right.
who calls it the China virus. That's their choice to do that. It's America, and it's not called the China virus because we want to wage war against Asians that live in America. It's called the China virus because it came from China. There was never any racial undertone to that, and there was never, when Trump coined the phrase China virus, he didn't say, it's the China virus, now go out and beat up Chinese people and kill them. That's not what he said. I can't do a Donald Trump. But anyway, like I said, it's all, it's just nomenclature, and it depends on how the radical takes it and what they do with it and how they run with it. To me, it is the CCP virus, and that's what I've called it. I've never called it the China virus. That's the one thing I never agreed with, but I don't hold it against him, again, for saying it. It's a virus from that country, and, we had this Spanish flu, China virus. We've had, other viruses and flus and whatever they have that came from the country, and you say the country's name with it, and that's it. But this, of course, with our new society and cancel culture and this and that, has been taken to another level. All right, we got to move on here, Ada. We have a lot to cover here. So the second half of the show, we're going to be doing we're going to be talking about, as Ada said, we're going to be talking about. We're going to be focusing on the meeting between U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, President Biden's National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, and China's two top diplomats, State Councilor Wang Yi and Chinese Communist Party Foreign Affairs Chief Yang Jiechi. The meeting took place yesterday in Anchorage, Alaska. Here's a video from CNA outlining that meeting. Could you please roll that for us, Matthew? Thank you.
Relations between the United States and China will face a new test as officials from both sides meet in Alaska. The discussions are expected to be frosty, with Beijing warning that compromise is not on the cards. Live to Olivia Song and Simon Marks in a moment, but first, a look at what to expect from the talks.
An icebreaker to thaw increasingly tense relations. The stage is set in Alaska for a first face-to-face meeting between China and the Biden administration. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan will meet with China's top foreign policy officials, Yang Jiechi and Wang Yi. There's no guarantee of any breakthroughs, with both sides playing down expectations.
当然，我们并不指望一次对话就能解决中美之间的所有问题。 所以我们对这次对话也没有什么过高的期待或者说幻想。
Tough discussions are anticipated over trade, human rights, and the South China Sea. Beijing has warned it will not back down on key issues like Xinjiang and Hong Kong. The Biden administration has called engagement with China the biggest geopolitical test of the 21st century. But there remains hope for some common ground between the world's two largest economies. They include areas like climate change and pressuring North Korea over its nuclear program.
Olivia Xiong joins us live now from Beijing.
For those of you out there tonight that watched this past Tuesday's show here on The Fringe, we spoke about this meeting and how I would be covering it tonight. So here we go. The purpose of this very first face-to-face meeting between the Biden administration and the Chinese Communist Party officials is the very first of Biden's tenure. On the agenda were very difficult discussions over trade, human rights in Tibet, Hong Kong, and China's western Xinjiang region, and the Uyghurs. Also, key points to be discussed, as he said, were Taiwan, China's assertiveness in the South China Sea, and the coronavirus pandemic. No agreements were expected to come out of this meeting, and the White House did frame this meeting as an initial chance to address all the above-mentioned intense disagreements.
The ties between the U.S.-China have been torn for years, as you might well know, because of former President Trump's assertiveness and refusal to be bullied by world power. The Biden administration has not yet decided whether or not they would be willing to back down on hardline stances taken under President Trump. China, in return, has not said whether or not it's prepared to ease the pressure it has brought to bear to the U.S. and the rest of the world. It seems to me that from the outset, Blinken, at least the pressers I've seen with him, David, that he is willing to continue this hardline stance that I just spoke of. Whether or not President Biden is all out on board certainly is up for debate, but in my opinion, I do not feel at this point he is. Blinken has said we are clear-eyed about Beijing's consistent failure to uphold its commitments. As we spoke about how Beijing's aggressive and authoritarian behavior are challenging the stability, security, and prosperity of the Indo-Pacific region.
Yeah, that's right. There's a lot at play here for me, Ada. As you know, I've been pining for the U.S. to take a stronger stance and continue to take the stance put into place by President Trump, because the CCP must be held accountable for the atrocities, not only within their own borders, but with their biological warfare against the rest of the entire world with the creation and the execution of the COVID-19 virus in the Wuhan lab in Wuhan, China. We also have the issue of boycotting next year's Olympics. There is no way whatsoever that our nation or any other nation, in my opinion, should want to participate in the Olympic Games in a country that openly and freely outright crossed the crimes against humanity line more times than we can count. The CCP's genocide of the Uyghurs and murdering millions all over the globe with COVID-19 are proof enough that these Olympic Games should absolutely be boycotted, and are proof enough that we need to stop this and take down the CCP. So that fast forwards us to yesterday. It was the first day of the two-day summit. To say that the meeting started off with a bang is an understatement. Blinken opened the meeting with a few cordial words for the Chinese representatives and thanked them for traveling to come meet them in Alaska. Here's a video clip from yesterday's meeting.
Well, good afternoon and welcome. On behalf of National Security Advisor Sullivan and myself, our administration is committed to leading with diplomacy, to advance the interests of the United States, and to strengthen the rules-based international order. We'll also discuss our deep concerns with actions by China, including in Xinjiang, Hong Kong, Taiwan, cyber attacks on the United States, economic coercion toward our allies. Each of these actions threaten the rules-based order that maintains global stability. That's why they're not merely internal matters and why we feel an obligation to raise these issues here today. I've said that the United States relationship with China will be competitive where it should be, collaborative where it can be, adversarial where it must be.
We do not seek conflict, but we welcome stiff competition, and we will always stand up for our principles, for our people, and for our friends. We look forward to discussing all of these matters with you in the hours ahead.
关于所谓这个网络袭击问题，我想想，网络袭击的能力使用方面，美国都是冠军。我们希望美国在讲什么普世价值啊，什么国际舆论的时候，想想自己心里是不是踏实？因为你们不能够代表，你们只能代表美国政府。
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hold on 1 second, please. Hold on 1 second. Mr. Director, State Counselor, given your extended remarks, permit me please to add just a few of my own before we get down to work, and I know Mr. Sullivan may have a few things to say as well. I have to tell you, in my short time as Secretary of State, I've spoken to, I think, nearly 100 counterparts from around the world, and I just made my first trip, as I noted, to Japan and South Korea. I have to tell you, what I'm hearing is very different from what you described.
我们把你们想得太好了，我们认为你们会遵守基本的外交礼节。
Well, I think we thought too well of the United States. We thought that the U.S. side will follow the necessary diplomatic protocols.
所以我们刚才必须阐明我们的立场。
So for China, it was necessary that we make our position clear.
我现在讲一句，你们没有资格在中国的面前说。 你们从实力的地位出发，同中国谈话。
So let me say here that in front of the Chinese side, the United States does not have the qualification to say that it wants to speak to China from a position of strength.
Well, that escalated quickly, Ada. Wow. To recap, that meeting quickly veered away from the usual diplomatic throat clearing that usually takes place in front of cameras before the real meeting ever gets underway. As the two sides traded the unusually intense remarks, Blinken called the cameras, as we saw, back to counter the Chinese officials' comments, particularly their slights about U.S. democracy, as you just heard. And that set off that unexpected chain that you just saw of rebuttals on which each side just went back and forth with each other.
Right.
Yeah, we believe that it's important for the United States to change its own image and to stop advancing its own democracy in the rest of the world. That's what Yang said. In his extended opening remarks, just to recap that, many people within the United States actually have little confidence in democracy, or many people within the United States have very little confidence in the democracy of the United States, Yang said. According to opinion polls, the leaders of China have the wide support of the Chinese people. What he's saying right there, Ada, is he's talking about, and this was talked about later is he's talking about Black Lives Matter, how because of Black Lives Matters, there's no faith in our democracy, and that's just such a bad example to use. And they actually compared the genocide of blacks to the genocide that's occurring right now in Xinjiang with the Uyghurs. And to close this out real quick, before you and I get to our discussion, Ada, Yang challenged the U.S. claims to global leadership, saying that the U.S. does not represent the world. It only represents the government of the United States. Before the State Councilor Wang Yi weighed in to say China would not accept the unwarranted accusations from the U.S. side. So, where you stand on all this, Ada? What are your thoughts?
You know, David, the interesting thing is that they even dared to compare BLM with the genocide of the Uyghurs. As we talked about, the BLM is talking about equality, racial equality, and definitely not anything close to genocide. The fact that they can compare these things or these two situations on the same level is completely ludicrous, in my opinion. And something that they completely left out of this meeting on purpose, I am sure, is COVID-19 itself. So the CCP virus, to say. They did not speak of that at all, but just pointed fingers at the U.S. when it comes to BLM and the Asian hate crimes that they say are escalating in the U.S. So these things are very interesting that they definitely did not bring out the things that are most at stake here when it comes to the lives that are suffering and the lives that has been lost due to COVID that came from a lab in Wuhan. So in my opinion, I don't think the meeting was exactly on topic per se, but it definitely brought out the fact that China is scared and nervous, which is why they are pointing fingers and talking to the U.S. in such a way that tries to diminish them and their opinion as a very strong country.
Yeah, and that's what China's out to do there, Ada. They want to, or the CCP actually. It's so difficult. Sometimes you have to remember. Well, it's not difficult. It's just something you need to remind people of that the Chinese people and the CCP are two completely different entities. The Chinese people are kind of caught in the middle of this whole thing. They have to do what their government says, or as you know, they'll find themselves disappeared, or even worse, death, if you don't agree with what the CCP says. To me, Ada, and I'm gonna piggyback on the little point that you made there about COVID. Today is the second day of the meeting, so I think maybe they probably talk about COVID today. I know they have other topics that they need to get to. COVID was on the agenda, and that's a big one. That's probably the biggest because people are pointing fingers at China, and I did hear some breaking news previously today that during the meeting it was discussed. COVID was discussed, and they were talking about. A bit, not much, but they were gonna. Yesterday was kind of like a warm up for them to really go at each other's throats today. But it was just mentioned that China actually said to the American representatives that they'd be willing to focus on making changes in or looking further into the Uyghurs, Taiwan, and maybe Hong Kong if we were willing to stop pressuring them about COVID-19. Are you kidding me? No, you've got to be held accountable for everything. Ada, there's a reason why they said that. They don't want us to investigate COVID-19 anymore because they know that we know. Exactly. That's what a guilty person does. This isn't court where you're trying to make a decision what the penalty is going to be for doing something wrong. We'll just give him 10 years if he pleads guilty. We'll give him 10 years, but if he pleads guilty, we'll only give him $5 and $100,000 fine. How's that sound? That's how lawyers kind of work things out before a decision's even made, if there's no jury involved. And that's kind of what they're trying to do here. There's a lot of guilt involved with a statement like that. And I'm very curious to see how this turns out. As soon as we get off here, I'm going to be putting on OAN or MSNBC, or I'm sorry, not MSNBC, OAN or Newsmax, and checking out what the latest developments are on this very important meeting. But what I wanted to say, Ada, was this is the thing with China and the CCP, not with China, but with the CCP, and you know this, that they lie. We know everybody out there who who's listening to this show, all of our fringers that have followed us for the past 20 episodes, and all those people that are risking, their lives to listen to us in China, we thank you, first of all. We're praying for you every day. Know that the CCP's endgame, their ultimate goal, is to take over this entire world. We heard Gordon Chang talk earlier this week that they were creating a virus that might be capable of wiping out humanity, a humanity destroying virus, so they can just take over the entire world and do whatever they want. That's their end game, and it's scary. And that's why, to me, a meeting like this is important, and I was kind of putting a lot of importance on it. But when I look back and I think about it, I think, well, we already know what their end game is, so why would you believe anything they're going to say at this meeting anyway? They lie all the time. They even if they made a promise to the U.S., just say China or the CCP sits there today and says, yeah, we're going to make sure that we take down all of those concentration camps in Xinjiang. We give Hong Kong their democracy back. We'll take all of our ships away from the South China Sea near Taiwan, and we'll leave Taiwan alone. Do you really think, Ada, after the meeting's over, when they fly back to their compadres in China, the CCP, that they're going to do that? Any of that?
No, definitely not. And they're playing it out exactly how Mr. Steve Bannon called them, is that the CCP in China is a mafia group. That's exactly how they're acting, blackmailing, all of the accusations that are completely empty accusations, and just the fact of negotiation. That's just what mafia groups does. It's definitely not how a government should be run at all. And we're definitely anticipating some more talk when it comes to COVID in the meeting that happened today. But in the meantime, it's no doubt that China is circling around or just trying to avoid all of the accountability that they should be held accountable for, is when it comes to the virus and when it comes to cyber attacks, etc.
Yeah, that's a great point. And one of the things that I've noticed too from this meeting is, and we've talked about this in the past, and anyone who knows anything about the way the CCP operates and how they act, is they were basically bullies at this meeting. They were trying to bully the U.S. Unfortunately, there wasn't Mike Pompeo on the other side of the table, or I think things would be a little bit different right now with the way he presents himself and how he goes at the Chinese, and how him and Trump really had this great policy and we were putting sanctions on everything. Blinken doesn't come across to me as a person that I'd be kind of reeling back from a little bit. And like I said, no matter what's said, Ada, it may just come down to, again, that it really doesn't matter, as we know, what the CCP says or does, until they're held accountable. And until the CCP is held accountable and they are just completely eradicated, we're not going to see any changes. China's going to continue doing the CCP is going to continue doing what the CCP wants to do, and that's world domination. And we know that. Everything that's happening today in the United States, all of this chaos among our races, all this political animosity, people picking one side or the other, our infighting amongst each other, is all because of the CCP. They created all this by creating that virus.
Right. And to wrap things up a little bit, I would like to say that there is definitely hope that we see here, as the U.S. has sanctioned the 27 government officials of the CCP and of Hong Kong who were related to those 47 democratic activists being held accountable and being held in trials and just being completely jailed until their next trial. So it's very promising to see that people are being held accountable by the U.S. and the U.S. are voicing their opinions when it comes to what can be done within the nation, and that is just sanctioning them. This is what we want to see more of, right, David? This is what we want to see more of in terms of decoupling or just holding them accountable for their actions and for speaking up for those people who have voices but are being shut down. This is what we're trying to do here at the Fringe too, is to let the world hear the voices that are being shut down and being completely quieted by the CCP. Those are the voices that we need to listen to, and those are the voices of whistleblowers as well.
Yeah, and to kind of put a little bow tie on this, if I may, one thing that the CCP is also looking at is our leadership. Obviously, Joe Biden, he disappears. We never see him. When we do, it's for 5 minutes. He doesn't hold a full press conference ever. The man fell down steps today. It was awful. He was climbing steps into Air Force One, and he fell not once, not twice, but 3 times. It felt so bad for him. It looks so pathetic. He's not in any kind of shape to run this country. And China's not going to take him seriously, and that's just the way it is. We already had Putin over in Russia wanted to have a debate with him because Biden called him a killer. There's a lot going on right now. And this man is cashing checks, he's writing checks that his body can't cash. Mm-hmm. His days are numbered. I feel bad. I want our president, from the beginning, people have questioned his stability physically and mentally, and it's all falling apart right in front of our eyes, right before our eyes, right? We see it happening every day. And that's something we also need to be concerned with because there was some speculation, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but there is speculation that they wanted to, the reason why these, the overall plan for our democracy, for our country, was for Biden to only be able to serve 2 years. That way, Kamala Harris could serve the next 2 years and it would be able to be reelected twice. So she could end up serving a total of 10 years. And by that time, we're a communist government. And they messed with our election process and balloting so they can make sure that happens. So we are not only dealing with a lot of strife with our international relationships with countries like China and Russia, we are also dealing with that strife within our own borders, with our borders being open to millions of people that are coming in and we have nowhere to put them. There's a lot going on right now, and that's why we thank you for coming on our show and listening to us and listening to what we have to say, because this isn't over by a long shot. This is going to be probably one of the longest presidential administrations we've ever seen. There's a lot that's going to happen, and we're in the first, 50 days here, Ada, and all this is going on? Unbelievable.
It's honestly just record-breaking how much has gone on.
Yeah.
But we are definitely going to keep an eye out on what happened today and fill you, our Fringers, in on next Tuesday's episode and continue to discuss what has been brought up and the highlights of the meeting from today. Right, David?
Yes. All right. And I think we're going to close that now, Ada. I'd like to thank you for joining me this evening. It's always a pleasure to spend a Friday night with you, and I always look forward to it, and I anticipate our next Friday together. I'd also like to give special thanks to our entire production team here at The Fringe, our OBS producer tonight, Matt, and our amazing translation team, and to all of our researchers. The Fringe is simultaneously broadcast, like I said, in Chinese and English right here on gtv.org, MOS Talk, every Tuesday and Friday from 7 to 8 p.m. Thank you to all of our Fringers out there. We appreciate you joining us every evening. Isn't that right, Ada?
That is right. Thank you for being here with us, and thank you for listening to what we have to say, as well as listening to the truth and the facts that we bring to you.
Right. Okay, and we'll be back live again next Tuesday from 7 to 8 p.m. For The Fringe, I am David Vincent Bob. Be safe, be free, and God bless you and your families. Have a great weekend. Good night.
Good night.
Nice.
take down the CCP, 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 take down the 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 CCP, 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 take down the CCP, take down the CCP, take down the CCP.
Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Follow me and I'ma set us free. Take down the CCP. Let me tell you what I've been through, baby. Lived a life that was hella unfair. Seen things that been driving me crazy. In a country where the leaders don't care. Didn't think we had the courage to change it. Tore it down and they weren't prepared. Everything that they kept us from saying. Now we talking and they better be scared. Take from us. Tell us what and who to love. Swear I finally had enough. It's time to rise above. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Follow me and I'ma set us free. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Communism's dead to me because it killed our families.
Communism sucks, hard for me to give a fuck. I had to tell them and they try to keep it on the hush. Middle finger up, turn into a fist. They wanna keep the poor so they never rich. If you wanna see the future, look into the past. Been a century of silence, we gon' take it back. I'm just stating facts, tell you how it is. Ain't no way to change shit if we don't resist.
Take from us. Tell us what and who to love. Swear I finally had enough. It's time to rise above. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Follow me and I'ma set us free. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Communism's dead to me because it killed our families.
这是你我维护正义的必须，这是你我维护正义的必须。Take down CCP.
Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Follow me and I'ma set us free.